back now with Scott Thornbury. Welcome, you've just come off the train.
The plane.
The plane. Well, welcome back.
Thank you. It's nice to be here. What a fabulous location. This is a great change from Liverpool whenever it was 9 years ago in the IATEFL Hotel. I mean, it's just another venue, another city for me. I've never saw this aspect of it before, so this is great.
It's gorgeous, lovely. And what have you got lined up this week?
Well, going to lots of talks, lots of meetings, lots of schmoozing, and also taking part in the English Language Teaching Journal debate on Thursday evening with Catherine Walter, where we'll be arguing about whether or not published materials reflect the lives and the needs of the learner. So I'm not going to say anything more about that because I don't want to give the game away. My position on published materials is fairly well known, but there will be some surprises.
Yeah, and that's being live streamed.
Apparently, yeah.
Yeah, so people can tune in and watch that. What time is it again?
It's at 5:05 we kick off.
All right. Yeah, then I'm sure we'll get a lot of comments about that.
Well, that will be interesting. Yeah. And there will be comments from the floor too. So basically, both Catherine and I do our little first bit, and then we hand it over to the floor for about 20 minutes, and then it's back to us to sum up.
Okay.
And then there's a vote by acclamation.
Yeah, that's a little hard to gauge.
Yeah, very hard. Diplomatically hard.
All right, and we were talking before we went live about a book that you've written a chapter on. Can you tell us about that?
Well, this book is out. It's on the Cambridge stand, I gather, but I still haven't seen a copy. No, Jane Arnold from the University of Seville approached me about 2 years ago. Well, actually, we've been in correspondence for a long time because she's an old friend of Earl Stevick. And Earl, who's now into his 80s, I guess, I mean, for those of you who don't know Earl Stevick's work, he was probably the foremost proponent of humanistic teaching approaches in the 70s, 80s, through some wonderful books that he wrote. And although not so well known on the sort of IATEFL circuit, he was big in the TESOL world in the States, and also he taught at the School of International Training in Vermont, where I had a brief. I taught for a semester, although I never actually met him, he'd retired. But anyway, they put together a kind of tribute volume of papers which speak to the various themes that were interesting, he was interested in and helped promote. And with a strong humanist kind of subtext, or actually not even a subtext. And the book is called Meaningful Action. And Jane asked me if I would do a piece, and I just blogged about, it's a long story, but I kind of got interested in this whole thing about what's called now, I guess, it's called embodied cognition. It's the notion that our thinking takes place not just in the kind of the grey matter of the brain, but it extends into the world and extends back from the world, and that we're constantly interacting physically with the world as we think, and we use things like gesture, for example, to help shape our thinking, and we think literally with our hands. And so all this sort of stuff can have, this is amazing, because when you go back to the 60s and the 70s, people like Earl Stevick were promoting methodologies like total physical response, talking about holistic learning. He talked about what he calls somatic learning, it's kind of learning through the body as well as through the mind, etc. So in a sense, this was predicting, if you like, or it's retrospectively been rehabilitated or vindicated through work now done which comes from all sorts of fields. It comes from fields like cybernetics, looking at how do you get robots to interact with their environment and think at the same time and respond physically to what's going on, etc. There's a lot of work there, a lot of work done in animal, the higher primates, looking at chimpanzees and gorillas and how they interact using gesture and physical touch and proxemics and all this kind of thing. So lots of feeder fields coming and saying, yes, there's an awful lot going on here. That thinking, for a long time, we've been locked into this image that, a long time, since the 80s, I suppose, where it's the metaphor of the brain as the computer, and so you get all this like input, output, feedback, etc. And so it's all happening in here. And now Stevick and people are saying, no, actually, there's a lot more to it than just the little black box of the brain. There's the whole the whole holistic thing going on.
Exactly.
So it's just making me think, how does this reflect on now everyone's pushing for online learning?
Well, that's such a good question because
exactly.
I was talking to some students. We had a focus group a couple of weeks ago in Barcelona, and Luke Meddings and I were running this focus group, just getting some students, Spanish students, attitudes to things like course books and their learning and how they like it, etc. And the question came up of online learning, and one of the students there, she said, she does this a kind of an intercambio, an exchange, conversation exchange with somebody on Skype. I'm saying, oh, great, fantastic. I've known people who've done something. And she said, yeah, it's okay, but I really like being in a room with other people. And she let it over and she touched one of the other students. She said, I like to touch people. And I thought, that's so very Spanish. But it's also, you can simulate on Skype even. We're so close to be able to sort of recreate the full experience of classroom learning, but there's that tiny little bit that's kind of missing, and I don't think it'll ever be replicated. And it's that physicality, the immediacy of it. And plus this being able to really, other things I've been interested in looking at studies of how people align themselves to each other when they talk. We know this, when somebody crosses their arms and we're talking to them, you'll cross your arms, or when somebody crosses their legs. Mirroring, exactly. And we do this with intonation, we do this with the words that we choose. Even we choose the words, we echo the words that somebody. And you can do that to a certain extent online, but it's that kind of physicality and immediacy, and it's a here and now kind of thing. So, it's a very good question.
I do feel like it's there and it has its use or its place, but it's kind of a matter of convenience. When it really comes down to it, I think that people by and large prefer to be in the same place. And having that.
Well, there's now good reasons to suppose that they do. And some of these other studies have been looking at the way teachers in classrooms interact with their learners and create these kind of learning spaces with them. So when the students are doing group work, the teacher will kind of create a mini class inside the class just by her body and her gestures. So it's like building a little tent inside this bigger tent, and that will a temporary structure, and then that is a little intimate space where things happen, and then she'll move on. And good teachers are able to do this, and they kind of literally shape the interaction with their gestures, their hands, their body language. Incredibly important.
And whilst you were writing this chapter, were you also observing lessons and seeing how
I was observing life. As soon as you start reading about all this stuff about gesture and alignment and interactivity, so you just start to look at people. You become obsessed with the way. I can't stop. I can look at anybody. I can try to work out what sort of conversations people are having, just judging by that. Looking at way people on mobile phones when they're walking down the street are gesturing wildly, and of course, who can see them? Not the person they're talking to. So I'm really aware of that kind of thing now. But when I look at classrooms, when I interact on things, online things, like with webinars or this kind of thing, I am conscious that nobody wants to just watch a talking head. That there's more to it than that. Yeah. So you start to become aware of the theatricality of these kind, and how important that is. I got a friend who works in theatre, and he said, yes, I was telling him all about this, and he said, yes, this is amazing. There's mime artists have known this for years, and there's a mime artist called Jacques Lecoq, French guy, and he says one of his lines he's best known for is the body remembers. So it's not just the mind that remembers, it's the body remembers. And we need to, and they've done experiments with young kids learning vocabulary in their first language and showing the kids who learn vocabulary and mime the words as they're learning them have a much better recall than the ones who don't. So it all goes back to things that Earl Stevick was saying years ago about holistic learning.
Yeah, I think it's quite interesting how some of these things are coming back around. You mentioned, holistic learning, humanistic language teaching. You mentioned total physical response, which some people may know as sort of 70s designer methods. And now we're in this age of technology, and how far... I would love
Well, it's a matter of bringing them together, I think, and seeing what can be done. We are very close. In the very fact that this woman in Spain is doing Skype conversations with somebody in English, and you think, well, that's fantastic. That opportunity never existed, even 5 years ago.
And with iPads and things, you've got gestures, don't you? So even if you are designing something online, making it a gesture to
Well, this is why a lot of the interesting research is being done exactly in this field. It's trying to make the interactivity between computers, etc., even more real, and it's feeding back into other fields like education, etc.
We need a hologram. That's what we need.
Yeah,
that would be
well,
helpful.
that's the next stage.
Yeah.
Next year it'll be me sitting here. It won't be me at all. It'll be a fuzzy hologram.
And the next step too is for teachers thinking about their classroom layout and having space.
Absolutely.
So role plays and things shouldn't just be done as sitting, going hello, but
the
stand
classroom
up,
space is so important, and how we underestimate it. And I know that from being a conference speaker, that how the shape of the room that you're in and the organisation of the furniture, the colour of the walls even, can make a huge difference.
Yeah.
A huge difference. So the talk that you did at one place went incredibly well, and it was really great. And you do exactly the same talk in another room somewhere else, and it just completely bombed.
So bring some paint with you and be
Bring
prepared
some,
to get
exactly. Change the colour of the walls. Yeah.
Absolutely. Thank you very much. It's great to catch up with you
It's
today.
wonderful to be back.
Thank you, Scott.
Have a great conference.
Yes, okay, we'll be back in a few minutes with Paul Seligson.